Hi, good afternoon. We'd like to welcome all of you to our second session of the Erie County Workforce Collaborative Training Series that we're holding in April. The Erie County Department of Mental Health is happy to be able to offer these trainings to our providers in our community to support workforce retention and provide an opportunity for individuals from our provider community to share their expertise. Today, we are excited to have Julianna Everdyke, LMSW from Erie County Department of Mental Health. She's our Director of Dual Recovery and Community Integration, along with Lindsey Allen, MSW from Peaceprints of Western New York, their Director of Community Programs with Project Blue and Empower Youth, Sherene Bennett, the Erie County Service Link Stop Director, and Tanya Drake, the Erie County Reentry Taskforce Coordinator, here with us today to speak on barriers to reentry. We are also excited to announce that our next training, which is coming up in May, will have Melinda Dubois with us. She's the Executive Director of the Mental Health Advocates for a presentation on self-care, the mind-body connection. This session will be on Tuesday, May 23rd from 12 until 1 p.m. A few reminders here before we start. At the end of this session, we will be asking everyone to complete a very brief evaluation. We encourage everyone to take a minute to fill this out so that we can continue to improve this collaboration. We will put the link for our May session in the chat at the end of this session, but we will also be sending out the training announcements, or you can always go to our erie.gov/mental health website for the announcements and registration information. Just as a reminder, most of the sessions are the fourth Tuesday of the month from 12 until noon. We'd encourage everyone to mark your calendars and watch for notices for our future events. All of the presentations and recordings for our past offerings are posted on our website, so we'd encourage everyone to check those out as well. We're always looking for volunteers to share their expertise with our community of providers. So if you are interested in doing a 1-hour presentation, or if you're interested in a particular topic, please indicate that on your evaluation, or you can reach out to Amy. Her email address is amy.rockwood@erie.gov. Our training today is being recorded. Everyone is muted, so if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat during this presentation, and the presenters will be answering questions as we go along. Yeah. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and I'd like to introduce Julianna, Lindsey, Sherene, and Tanya for their presentation on barriers to reentry.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lindsey Allen. Like Kathleen said, I work for Peaceprints and I oversee our 2 community-based programs, Project Blue and Empower Youth. So I'm going to go ahead and get us kicked off today, and we look forward to your guys' questions and answers at the end of our presentation. So we're here today to discuss reentry and the barriers that come with somebody returning back to our communities from incarceration. So most importantly, we should discuss what is reentry. Reentry has become I would say, hot topic, hot conversation over the past 10 years or so. And people that have been in the field are saying it's about time, right? We have a lot of importance when it comes to reentry. And the term reentry refers to the transition of offenders from prisons or jails back into our communities. And this is important because we are all going to be neighbors with these individuals someday. Specifically, around 95% of individuals that are incarcerated, whether that be jail or prison, will be released back into our communities. And so investing in them prior to their release and during that reentry process is something that's very pivotal for not only their success, but also community safety as well. We also wanted to discuss a little bit about reentry and institutionalization. For those that maybe have not heard of what institutionalization is, we wanted to touch on that today because it is something that's not always discussed. We talk a lot about different barriers that we'll go through in this presentation, but institutionalization is something that a lot of people might not be mindful or aware of. The definition of institutionalization is the process by which behaviors and ideas become patterned, regulated, and established within a social institution. And you might wonder why we bring up institutionalization. And it is because it's not always something that you can physically see or something that these individuals might also see themselves or recognize. So when we speak of institutionalization, we might, if you're not in the reentry field, think of it as somebody that is not social, antisocial, kind of self-isolated, etc. But that has become more common for them the longer that they have been incarcerated in a facility. I know Tanya probably sees it a lot working with folks that are coming out of state prisons. For individuals that have been incarcerated for an extended period of time, we're talking 10 plus years, they become almost normalized for what the day-to-day life is while incarcerated. They are told when they are eating, when they are going to sleep, when they are moving. Every single thing and behavior that they do while they're incarcerated is controlled and is told when that's going to be happening. For somebody that has been incarcerated for an extended period of time, that is then all gone when they are released from prison. And when you get out, it is up to you to figure it out and to be able to learn how to operate almost in a different world. A lot of individuals that have been to prisons, they also call prisons the land. It's like a different land that people go to while they're incarcerated, and it is not comparable to outside in our community. So we did want to show a short clip from a movie regarding institutionalization and the impact that it has. I do want to just give a couple heads up before we start this video. It is a quieter video, so if you want to turn your volume up a little bit on your computer so that you can be sure to hear it. And then we also just wanted to provide everybody on this call with a trigger warning for this video because it does end with suicide. So we just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. So if this is not something that you wanted to watch, we wanted to let you know ahead of time. And again, you might want to turn your volume up a little bit for the video and then turn it back down.
Yeah, take care of you no more, kid. It's gone now. You're free. You're free. Dear fellas, I can't believe how fast things move on the outside. I saw an automobile once when I was a kid, but now they're everywhere. The world went and got itself in a big damn hurry. Parole board got me into this halfway house called the Brewer and a job bagging groceries at the foodway. It's hard work. I try to keep up, but my hands hurt most of the time.
Make sure your man double bag. Last time he didn't double bag, and the bottom near came out.
Make sure you double bag, that's what he said.
Sir?
Well, very well. I don't think the store manager likes me very much. Sometimes after work, I go to the park, feed the birds. I keep thinking Jake might just show up and say hello, but he never does. I hope wherever he is, he's doing okay and making new friends. I have trouble sleeping at night. Bad dreams like I'm falling. Wake up scared. Sometimes it takes me a while to remember where I am. Maybe I should get me a gun and rob the food away so they'd send me home. I could shoot the manager while I was at it, sort of like a bonus. I guess I'm too old for that sort of nonsense anymore. I don't like it here. I'm tired of being afraid all the time. I've decided not to stay. I doubt they'll kick up any fuss. Not for an old crook like me.
So we do know that that video is heavy, but we did think that if we are going to be talking about barriers to reentry, we definitely needed to touch upon those that we don't often talk about, or those that service providers that don't work in reentry might not be aware of. So thank you for watching that with us. We know that the sound was a little bit off, but something that we wanted to just touch upon before we get a little bit started into the barriers of reentry. Just to kind of hit this back to home in Erie County a little bit, we wanted to share some local statistics with you. In 2022, in the Erie County jails, so we have the Erie County Holding Center, which is downtown, and then the Erie County Correctional Facility out in Alden. Both are run by Erie County. And in 2022, there was 4,521 individuals released from just those two facilities, returning back to our communities here in Erie County. On the slide, it does give a breakdown. Obviously, the majority of individuals who become incarcerated, whether that is state or local, are men. And we can see that reflected here that a little over 3,700 were men being released from the holding center and correctional facility, and then 735 were women. I am going to pass it over to Tanya to discuss a little bit of the New York State and parole stats as well.
Thank you, Lindsey. So as you know, my name is Tanya Drake. I am the coordinator for the Erie County Reentry Taskforce program, and in that program, we are a referral resource. We help individuals reintegrate into the community independently. And we're providing things such as whether it be housing, educational, vocational programs, insurance, and such. So I'm going to go into the stats. So in 2022, we had 304 individuals who were referred into our reentry program. 228 individuals out of the 304 were enrolled, and we had 16 violations they went back into reincarceration. So you see the statistics, you see where that works, as prior to that, there was a number of 37 individuals who were reincarcerated. So reentry works. And of course, you know, we have the bail reform and less is more, which is a determining factor. I'm going to pass it back to you, Julianna.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So again, I'm Julianna Everdyke. I work within the Department of Mental Health and oversee the service link stop and some of the reentry efforts that we're doing in Erie County. So one of the things that we wanted to show, and you'll see kind of some snippets throughout this this hour here of this podcast, or this I guess this hour on PBS called Searching for Justice is the title, and they have a variety of different sessions on there. This one is called Life After Lockup. And at the end of the presentation, we do have a link to the entire video if you would like to watch it. So we'll be playing this, a few clips of this as we go along.
We'll talk about drugs and addiction and crimes of poverty. I mean, many people find themselves in great despair. They turn to drugs. You know, they use drugs. They get hooked on drugs. These sorts of things happen. And when they do, the police are there to arrest them. The impact of the war on drugs, the longer sentences for everything, not just drug crimes, but everything ratchets up. The overuse of arrest and incarceration for what we might call crimes of poverty, addiction, the criminalization of things like homelessness, because these things are associated with drugs and drug crime. A set of policing strategies that attack low-level offenses. This led to many more people being arrested and incarcerated for much longer periods of time and has contributed in powerful ways to the ballooning of the prison system. Literature tells us that the children of incarcerated parents are more likely to go to jail or prison themselves. Incarceration takes someone out of the family system. It destabilizes the family system. This leads to deeper and longer bouts of poverty, deeper and longer bouts with homelessness. It is a direct route into foster care. And we know that precarity leads to crime. In other words, we've legislated the conditions that produce crime, not that reduce crime.
All right, Sherene.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sherene. I'm the Service Link Staff Director. And I just wanted to share with you today because we're open and inclusive. I'd like to provide an exclusive list with tips of how we can actually interact with returning citizens. So we don't want to remind them of where they have been and the price they've already paid by labeling them. Give them the opportunity to thrive and help them to reestablish their dignity. When you're in conversations with incarcerated people, do not call them inmates. We use soft words like incarcerated individuals. You know, in your conversation, when you're describing someone else, don't say the felon over there. We can say returning citizens, ex-convicts. You know, we can say justice-involved person. And quite often in our conversation and referrals, and as we go about our daily lives, we actually see these people as just, you know, what we describe them as on paper, ex-offenders, criminal prisoners. So we ask that our community be a little bit more sensitive to these people and address them with dignity. Persons in jail, persons in prison, formerly incarcerated. Words are powerful. Let's give them back their power. Thanks, Julianna.
Yeah. And one of the things too that going from all of our work is that we see individuals every day who are used to hearing these phrases that we put on the left to avoid. And so if we are kind of leading by example in even when we are talking to them saying, oh, you know, you're a returning citizen, right? So they're hearing people who are using these humanistic words towards them versus kind of taking away their humanity.
Yeah.
Tanya and Lindsey, any additional notes from individuals that you're working with in terms of language?
Yeah, they're pretty sensitive to that. So we try to follow what Sherene just talked about because they're already coming into the community with a stigma, which I'm going to talk in a little bit. With, you know, they think that people view them in a negative light. So, you know, that's already difficult for them. So it's important that we use these phrases and we try to avoid things as Sherene mentioned, felon, ex-convict, you know, just to make them feel comfortable.
Thank you.
Your daughter was not quite 2 at the time you were sentenced, is that right?
Right, I want to say she was like 18 months, I think.
Did you get to say goodbye to her, to anyone in your family?
I can't remember whether my daughter was there or not. But I did know throughout my incarceration, you know, I thought about her like every day, like I let her down, and I gotta do something to right this. And so I wanted to show her that last act which took me out of society, that's not who I am. That will not define me as your dad. I did apologize for the impetuous act that I committed at that age. And I can't take it back. And I can't say I know how they feel, the victim's family, because I never lost a child before. But I know that it was wrong, and I repented to God. And from then on, in prison, I tried to do my best to become a good person while I was behind them bars. I enrolled in school, and I got my GED. The Islamic faith, it appealed to me. So I said, one day I'm gonna become Muslim, and I did. And so I wound up becoming an imam. I took every ACE class they had available. That's adult continuing education. I had several jobs. I wound up becoming a GED too. I probably had every job you could think about in the prison. I started reading more and, you know, world history and icons of the world. And this what made me say, okay, I got to change my life. When I started reading about Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all these guys who went to prison, and that stigma or that incarceration didn't define them who they was. And so now I wanted to start working on my legacy, even while I was in prison. So I was released on February 10th, 2020, and it was like around 7 o'clock. And when I get to the door, the first person I see is my daughter. It was surreal.
After more than 2 decades in prison, Michael Plummer is released under a Washington, D.C. law that allows some prisoners who committed crimes as juveniles to be freed early.
I was just thinking, like, I'm finally free. What's the next step in my life? You gotta get a birth certificate. You gotta get a social security card. So I was gone for 23 years. So, and both parents passed away. So these documents was lost. And so I had to go and get them again. This felony is over top of your head, right? Not having established credit long enough. So I'm able to, you know, go and purchase a house or get the assistance that I need. It's just always a barrier there, letting you know that you made a mistake, and before this mistake, that these barriers will be placed in front of you.
Thanks, Juliana. So now we're going to get really into the meat of these barriers that we keep referring to. We have a lot on here, so we're just going to go into a little bit of detail for both to give some context. Whether you're in reentry or not, we know that housing is a barrier for everybody, especially most recently in our communities. So when we think of housing, we don't only just think of having the ability to live in a safe, clean, affordable place. We also think about when landlords are vetting for tenants, they are doing credit checks like the man mentioned in the video. They are doing background checks. All of those things on top of the difficult housing situations that we already have in our community are piled onto the folks with a criminal record when looking for housing. We also know that individuals who may have been convicted of a sex offense, that's a whole different set of barriers that come with housing. Having to be compliant with the sex offender laws, making sure that if they are applying for apartments, if that apartment has a public pool, it is automatically out for those individuals with a sex offense. Making sure that they're not close to daycares, to parks, to schools. If you think about it, there's a lot of schools in our community. Those individuals who have sex offense convictions really have limited housing options to begin with, let alone making sure that our individuals do get a fair shot at safe, affordable housing because they are still humans, just like you and I. So housing is definitely number one. We've done studies upon studies when it comes to top barriers for people, and housing is always between the first two. After that, employment. Employment is huge. He also mentioned this in the video. I think I've been doing this work for about 6 years, and over the past 6 years, I will say, because it can also very much seem very negative when we're talking about these barriers, but to have a light of hope here, employment has gotten to be a little bit, I will say, easier for our folks to obtain. Because so many people have criminal records in our communities, employers have had to become more adaptable and aware that hiring somebody with a criminal conviction does not mean that they are a poor worker. That means that they have made poor choices in their life, but that does not mean that they cannot do the job that they are applying for. So when it comes to employment, it is still a huge barrier when it comes to, again, running the background checks. A lot of people are interested in getting their CDL license or wanting to work for the NFTA. But if you have a criminal conviction, sometimes you cannot drive if you are on parole. If you had DWI offenses, it's very hard to get your license back, unpaid tickets, child support, all of those things, and then go into being able to get certain jobs if you want to drive with those jobs. With employment, you need identification, like he also mentioned in the video. Something that all 4 of us do on a daily basis and our teams do on a daily basis is getting identification. For a lot of us on this call, that might seem very simple to us. Our parents gave us our birth certificates and social security cards, and then we know how to go to the DMV to get our driver's license. For our individuals, that can be a huge barrier to even get employment or housing. So usually when we start working with folks, we start with their identification. If you want to get your social security card, you need a New York State ID. If you need a New York State ID, you need a birth certificate. So if they don't have all three of those things, it can be very difficult to get started obtaining those identifications that they need to succeed. Something that we also face is that when you are released from prison, you get a prison ID that does have their photo on it. It is a New York State issued ID, but that also, again, comes back to the stigma. Do we want our individuals having to use their prison ID to apply for a job? That says right there that I have a conviction, and you're having to put that out there into the universe just because you don't have the right identification. So getting their IDs, getting their birth certificates and social security cards is huge. It's also a huge barrier if those individuals have nothing to start with as well. Also accessing and reactivating benefits when it comes to health insurance. So once you are incarcerated, your health insurance goes to like incarcerated status. So if you are in need of health insurance while you are incarcerated because you have a medical emergency, you are now accessing like in prison health benefits. So when you get out, it is kind of another layer of red tape for you to have to call Medicaid or whatever insurance you are on and getting those benefits reactivated. That can be sometimes hard for individuals because you have to call a number, but if that individual doesn't have a phone, that again presents another barrier for them to get their benefits turned back on. If they're coming out of incarceration on medication that they need to get refilled, this is something that has to be done as soon as possible because you need active Medicaid or insurance to obtain those prescriptions. Again, just a lot of different things that influence somebody's life that we might not always think of. And then when it comes to public benefits, so entitlements through Department of Social Services, that again is another issue that we face. A lot of the interviews and things like that are now held via phone. What we notice with our clients that don't have phones, it's very difficult for them to be able to get that appointment and make it on time if they don't have a phone using somebody else's. And we all know going down to the Rath building is an experience in and of itself. So if they are seeking public benefits, making sure that they are prepped for that, because we know that our clients do not trust a lot of people. They don't trust a lot of systems. So if we are able to kind of prep them to say, going down to the Rath building to get your benefits is not going to be the most pleasant experience. These are some pointers and tips so that you don't lose your patience or you start to get frustrated, because we know it can be a whole day affair. Just kind of giving them a little tips and tricks before they even get to something that they need to do so that they have an expectation laid out for them. And then lastly, for my section, long wait times when it comes to medical, mental health, and substance use appointments. This is nothing new for any of the fields that we're working with. So all of the people on this call, I'm assuming, can relate to this. But for individuals who, let's say, are on medications, if they need to see a provider to get a prescription filled, having that long wait time between appointments post incarceration can be a barrier for our individuals, and something that we absolutely want to be mindful of. I will pass it over to Tanya.
Thanks, Lindsey. Just to go along with the mental health piece, you know, I can't express how important this piece is, you know, because that's basically the foundation that they have to start at in order to move forward with all of their other conditions that they have. You know, when we get them, when we start the assessment, you know, we may see the referral and it may say OMH 6. And then once we're finished with the assessment, we find out that there's something else that needs to be addressed as far as mental health. So thank you for that. Moving on to stigma, in working with individuals who've been incarcerated, you see the stigma they feel in the way of how they think and feel about themselves and how they feel people view them. They can have a negative, this can have a negative impact in the way of functioning. This is a huge barrier because it can prevent them from applying for jobs or community participation. You know, you hear things like, oh, I'm not good enough for this job, or I don't have the skills, or, you know, or they're not going to hire me because of my record. And in doing Ready, Set, Work, there's a question that I ask, going back to the employment piece. I ask them, what is the longest job that you've had? And they tend to veer towards what they had prior to incarceration. And I say, okay, so did you have a job while you're incarcerated? They said yes. And I say, okay, so how long have you been in that job? How long have you been doing that? And they'll say that, and that's the longest job they've actually held. So I say, okay, that's your longest job that you've held. That is a valuable skill that you have. Do not dismiss everything that you've learned while you're incarcerated, because all of those skills that you've learned, all those educational, vocational programs that you've taken are good once you are released. That is going to help you obtain employment. So then we have access to higher education. And, you know, that is kind of like when they come out, they're not sure what direction to go to. So that's why we have programs such as ECC Education to Recovery, where they're linked with a case manager to help them through the process. Because, you know, in the beginning, applying for education, they go through that question of conviction. So they're there to help them. So there are more and more educational programs that are they're dedicated to helping individuals who have been incarcerated. So they're, you know, they can move on with their education, the educational piece. Moving on to transportation, that can still be an issue right now. We have for our program what is called Uber Health. So this kind of like decreases the barrier for their transportation or access to their medical appointments or their treatment appointments. And we also try to provide day passes. And then the treatment provider then provides a monthly bus pass, but they have to, and this is where it kind of gets difficult, they have to enroll in those programs. And sometimes it's difficult to get them linked with those programs. So that's another issue that still needs some improvement. And there's also Medicaid transportation we do help them with. And there's also a program called Save the Michaels. That's also a transportation program for them as well. They do have transportation. Moving on to supervision, you know, when we meet with the individuals, we say, you know, the parole officers or probation officers are there to help you. They want to see you succeed. They come out with this negative view, saying, oh no, you know, they're just waiting for me to, you know, fail, and that's not true. So we try to incorporate that and say, you know, they're there to help you. So.
All right. We do actually have a comment and a question that came in. The first was a comment. I think these both tie back to the identification piece. So the comment was that and I think they're referencing the prison ID doesn't get honored by anyone, not for cigarettes, not for the DMV, not to return, you know, something to the department store that doesn't fit. Most individuals don't have a bank account when released and need that to cash their checks from work. The New York State DOCCS ID doesn't work for that either, more of just an announcement that you were in prison. But a question that came in was, why aren't these documents being requested prior to release?
That is a great question, and it makes so much sense if they were addressed pre-release while they were still in DOC's custody. Something that we are mindful of is that the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, they do not focus on reentry at the start of someone's incarceration. There's 3 different phases when you go through prison, and once you get to phase 3, which is about 90 days before your release, that is when they are starting to talk about your reentry back into the community. And that is done by individuals who are facilitators in the prisons, meaning that they are incarcerated individuals who have been incarcerated for a long period of time and will continue to be incarcerated for a long period of time, who are the teachers for these classes and have not returned back to our communities and will not be returning back to our communities for an extended period, but they are the ones teaching these individuals how to reintegrate back into the community. There are transition coordinators, like counselors, they're called ORCs in DOCs, that do reentry, and they work closely with Parole and Tanya's program to get them housed upon release, because they must be housed to be released from prison. But in a perfect world, we would be able to request certain identifications. I know that there is sometimes abilities to get certain things like birth certificates and social security cards. In my experience, the individuals that have come out into our residential programs do not have them. So I think it kind of depends what facility they're in, what counselor they're getting, and what that looks like.
Thanks, Lindsay. And then
I
just one,
see the comment regarding that they'd have the ability to be able to do that. That is great to know. I just don't see it in an everyday world. That was the only thing that I see in everyday.
There was also a question about the mental health piece as far as their appointment time. I don't know if you can pull that back up or what the.
sure. The next question was, how can changes be made to alleviate the long wait for mental health treatment? Leaving that unaddressed for long periods of time can be harmful.
I agree. So I know I'm not 100% sure if they're still continuing it, but I know that I know Horizons was scheduling people for phone appointments because they would not be able to access their appointments right away because of the long wait time. So having a virtual appointment or a phone appointment, it cuts down the time and it allows them to get enrolled faster. I don't know if anyone has any more comments on this.
We are after Sherene does her section here, we are going to go into kind of some like what's next, what can providers do. So we will get to some of these other pieces after we have a long list of barriers to get.
All right. So thank you. Thanks, Julianna. Continue with barriers. Social isolation is real, and returning citizens experience multiple stages of isolation, beginning immediately with their own families and their own friendship circle. The wider community that provides social amenities for them, have them watched. They're threatened with suspicion, in the community. Every step they make, they're watched, they're documented. Sometimes there are even rallies to say that we do not want an incarcerated person living next door to us. So, that is quite a barrier for someone who's trying to reintegrate in the community. And lack of family support. Families do not necessarily want to have their, to have them back at home, depending on, quite often, if they've gone away to incarceration and their case was something that was publicized on television, they don't want to be associated with them at all. So them returning home, it's really not it's not an option for them. So sometimes, families fear reprisals and backlash too from neighbors, because neighbors will come over and they'll knock on your door. It is real, and say that, I have an eye on you and I'm watching you. So, those are some of the things that they really do have to deal with when we're talking about barriers. Computer literacy. Quite often, it is expected that, everyone is supposed to know how to monitor and know how to use a computer. And this is quite a barrier because it prevents employment, it prevents training opportunities, and employers are now asking for online. All direction is pointed to online. How can they get online if they don't really even know how to turn on a computer? So that is another barrier. And for the food insecurity, without employment, again, you're the returning citizen. Without employment, without opportunities to start their own business, how can they become viable citizens and take care of their own families if they're not, able to provide? So there's always going to be food insecurities, and I strongly believe that incarcerated persons should have a expedited ticket for food security once they're out. And for the lack of medical services and follow-up, it's we've actually experienced a lot of it with the older population that gets out. I know we really don't talk about ageism, but for the older population that come out, they really have no way of having proper follow-up medical appointments or even to see a specialist. So, these are some of the barriers we see on a daily basis. There's absolutely no follow-up until they get worse and they end up in emerge. So, I really hope that moving forward, these are some of the things that we can be cognizant of. Thank you.
And one more comment that came in, and I'm sure at the end of the presentation you can provide your contact information, but we have someone who worked in the New York State prison system, it sounds like, and just had a comment in regards to, if changes had been made in terms of, talking about some of these things during prison and if things have changed since then.
Yeah, I saw that comment from Chris. Chris, I would love to connect with you. Peaceprints prior to COVID did go in to discuss reentry in phase 3. But yeah, I would like to connect.
And then another question here in regards to Medicaid recipients, having, once they go active, having immediate access to healthcare, mental health care. It's from someone who works with Fidelis Care.
Yeah, and we will get to, how we try to expedite that process in a minute. So thank you. But just kind of as we take an overview of these barriers, really seeing how it can become overwhelming for people who are released, not only after immediately released, but also, as time goes on. And being able to recognize that when you're working with people, it can be quite a domino effect where, like Lindsey mentioned, and we kind of went through the page here, identification really impacts a lot. It impacts employment, it impacts stigma, it impacts food insecurity and mental health and substance use appointments. So really just being aware and cognizant, that one little thing can really disrupt an entire plan for individuals you're working with.
I write that the prison follows you like a ghost. It's a whispering interlocutor in the ear of the landlady or the landlord of the social service provider of the employer, because your record goes before you, and what your record does is it communicates to the other your danger, that you're a risk, and it tells them you're a risk. It's impossible to leave behind once you're marked a criminal. Have people been able to build productive lives for themselves? Absolutely, people have been able to build productive. Despite the barriers, what we do is we look at folks like that and we count the exceptions as the rule. But most people live lives of poverty, live lives where they're dependent on others to meet their basic human needs because we made them dependent.
Now we're going to get into kind of all of these barriers, yes, but what can we do? Where's the light at the end of the tunnel? So Lindsey's going to start us off on this.
Great, thanks, Juliana. So yes, like we said in the beginning, this can be very heavy. It can seem very negative, but we did want to shed a little bit of light onto what's been going well and where we see kind of things going. So overall, nationally, the rate of individuals being incarcerated has decreased. And although we remain the leader in imprisonment in the world, New York is one of the 9 states that has recently decreased their prison population by a significant amount. I do know that COVID definitely decreased the number of individuals going into the local jails. And then with New York State bail reform, that definitely and significantly decreased the amount of individuals being booked into the Erie County jails as well. So there is stuff that is happening on a national level as well and New York State level that I'll pass it over to Tanya, that people are mindful that we need to start really having alternatives to incarceration and not just kind of throwing them in a box and locking the key until they get out. So Tanya, I'll pass it over to you for a little bit of the New York State stuff that's going on with bills and laws.
Oh, I think you're muted, Tanya.
Sorry about that.
There we go.
So right now, as far as the Clean Slate Act, I don't think it's gone into effect as of yet. So the New York State legislature is working on what is called the Clean Slate Act. And what this will do is seal a conviction record 3 years after someone with a misdemeanor, and also 7 years after someone with a felony has been sentenced. And they would have to successfully complete community supervision. We don't know when this will go into effect. So this is just information that's been provided. And as far as the less is more, it's basically in March of last year, the Less is More Act went into effect. And what it does is reduces an individual's time on parole, where they earn 30 days of time credit for every 30 days in the community, which means if an individual is on parole and has no violations and are compliant with their parole conditions, they will have 30 days to take off their parole sentence. And what this act also does is it ends technical violations, maybe, for example, a missed curfew or a missed parole reporting appointment, which was huge prior to this.
Awesome. So we're just going to go into a little bit more locally as well. Different reentry services here in our county that have been implemented over the past 5 years. Like I said, I work for Peaceprints and I oversee our adult-based reentry program, which is called Project Blue. And that was Erie County's first jail-based reentry program. So something with reentry that we often talk about is recidivism. Before, in 2018, I believe it was, the Council of State Governments came into Erie County and did an assessment of our reentry services. And one of the things that they came through with those results was that there was not equal and equitable access to reentry services on all jurisdiction levels, and the county level being the one that did not have that access. So prior to all of these different services being implemented, somebody would leave the jail, go right back to the same situation that they were in before jail, and nothing would change. And with that, our county had an 81.5% recidivism rate, which is extremely high and something that we needed to be mindful of. Nationally, the recidivism rate sits around 67%, which is also very high, but Erie County was even higher. So all of these services listed below are able to kind of help reduce those recidivism rates. And individuals enrolled in Project Blue, where they enroll pre-release while they're in the jails. It's a voluntary program. We work with them for up to 1 year post-release. Our participants are only going back to jail at a rate of 10%. So we have seen different services like this be implemented that are working. And I'll pass it over to Sherene and Julianna to discuss the service link stop.
Okay, thank you, Lindsey. And because Service Link Stop is so invested in providing linkage and services to assist our returning citizens, we are meticulous. We listen to their stories. We learn what their needs are, and we really try to get them connected regardless of their gender, their affiliations, the culture, or their ethnicity. So coming to Service Link Stop, wow, you want to be coming to Service Link Stop. Okay. And so we will add dignity to their lives. We offer them a change of clothing, shoes. Sometimes they do come out to us and they have the bare minimum. You know, they're coming to us with wet clothing. We're able to, you know, change that narrative, change your story, right? And we do offer snacks. We provide linkage with mental health and medical appointments. We navigate emergency housing. We don't do permanent housing, but we're able to navigate emergency housing through our partners. We provide employment and training opportunities to our partners. We do have on-site linkage with Fidelis and other providers to get their Medicaid and benefits turned on almost immediately. And of course, we do a lot of advocacy. And I just want to give you sort of a little snippet. So we will have clients that, you know, that will have an appointment, let's say with DSS. And, you know, having an appointment with DSS, it's a life-changing thing for them. So they missed that appointment, and you know, for them, they're devastated. A simple phone call to their worker to explain to them through us what has happened and try to get that appointment rescheduled can make a world of a difference. Thank you. Over to Julianna. Sorry.
Tanya, go ahead for your program.
Okay, so I kind of touched up on it in the beginning. So our program, the Erie County Reentry Task Force, what we do is we help individuals link, like Service Link Stop, to programs, whether it be for their treatments that are recommended, cognitive behavioral interventions, employment readiness classes, such as Ready, Set, Work. Going back to the CBIs is Thinking for Change and interactive journaling, which they seem to enjoy. We also help them with insurance. If they don't have Medicaid insurance, we help them link with those services. We help them enroll in managed care as well. Their primary care appointments, as I said before, transportation, housing. We all know it's a crisis, but we're trying our best to try and help them with housing. As Lindsey was talking about, sometimes you may have individuals who have restrictions as far as like Sarah compliance. So we have to be cognizant of the restrictions in working with our individuals as well. Educational programs, there's so many, Northland Workforce, Pathstones, Pathways, ECC, Education to Recovery. So there's been an increase of programs that are helping our individuals progress in their community supervision.
Thanks, Tanya. Regarding the MAT program, Medicaid Assisted Treatment Program, that is operating. It launched in October, I believe it was, with the Sheriff's Office in Bass Self. It is something that the Erie County Legislature was very passionate about getting off the ground to provide individuals coming in, entering the jails that were on MAT, making sure that there was no gap with service. So that did launch with Bass Self. And if anybody has specific questions about MAT, we can get you in touch with Kathleen over at Bass Self that oversees that program. And then additionally, there's the New Dawn initiative. That's also a reentry program that's operated by the Sheriff's Office, and that focuses on individuals with co-occurring disorders. So individuals who are struggling, currently incarcerated with mental health and substance use. We have that initiative that's run by the Sheriff's Office. And to wrap this page up, I'll pass it over to Julianna to talk about the Reentry Coalition.
Thank you. So all of these, programs that we have talked about here, and we do have, the 3 representatives from Peaceprints, Project Blue, Service Link Stop, and the Erie County Reentry Taskforce program. So we wanted to highlight those 3. But the Erie County Reentry Coalition is a collaborative of a variety of local agencies, and they have been functioning, I believe, since 2016. And we're working with the CSG, which is what the report that Lindsey mentioned earlier. So they focus on almost like a needs assessment and strengthening the reentry services and resources. And out of that, Lindsey mentioned one of the recommendations, and they actually had, I think, 5 or 6 that they had recommended to Erie County, and we are actively working to continue to finish responses to those recommendations. One of them also was creating a physical reentry hub, as Sherene mentioned, the Service Link Stop. So we do have a physical space that's located at 120 West Eagle, and that is constantly evolving. We're also working on a virtual reentry space, so like a website for reentry services, which will be launching soon. But we're constantly working within the Reentry Coalition to better the supports and services available for returning citizens.
We do have one question that came in, Juliana. Will there be further collaboration with the OPWDD system from someone who oversees the clinical department at a health home that specializes in the IDD-DD population?
Yeah, so speaking from like the Service Link Stop perspective too, we do interact with individuals who either would qualify or do qualify for OPWDD services. And we've tried working with health homes providers through different behavioral health agencies within Erie County. We also work with accessible academics as well. But if you are open to or want to put your contact information in the chat, we are more than happy to connect and collaborate with you.
I can also add that at Peaceprints, we have seen a huge influx of individuals with falling into that DD category, and we have had informal conversations with People Inc., making sure that we're able to get those folks connected. But I think the biggest thing that we see is lack of a diagnosis. Once you get older, the harder it is to get that diagnosis and be able to be even in the OPWDD world. And that's something that we're constantly working through as well.
And we kind of wanted to wrap up. I know we have a few minutes left, but really focusing on, now that you've learned some of these barriers, some of these programs that we do have in Erie County to support individuals, what can you do as a provider? So I'm going to pass it to Sherene.
Okay, thank you. As a provider, what can we do? We can listen to individuals. They have a story. Every incarcerated person, they have a story to tell, and they want you to hear them. So, as providers, we can listen to them, listen to what they have to say, because the narrative is different when it comes from the person who's actually living it. providers can learn to be more attentive and hearing the needs of the individuals and provide them with that service. Educate them, provide resources and referrals to individuals, provide tools for them to use, scholarships, training, be open and ready to engage participants, even if they look different from what you look like. And quite often we have, our personal biases, but they look different from yourselves. They identify with a different group. As providers, we're leaving those things behind. We're trying to provide, we're trying to create services for them. Be open and accept individuals and retrain them in your establishment. So for example, if you have a computer literacy store and they're not exactly able to do that, but they want to work with you, they want to learn how to interact with people, train them, because perhaps they're not good with computers, but they want to learn how to greet someone. So be open and ready to help them. For second chances, incarcerated individuals need that second chance to thrive, not 3 strikes and you're out, or I told you so, I know you weren't going to make it, you're a waste of time. Those negativities actually turn them away. So as providers, we ought to be a little bit more, we should, as providers, provide more equipments and tools, time, partnership, and provide a lot more mentoring services to our incarcerated individuals. Thank you. Over to you, Julianna.
Thank you. And we did have, one last video, but I want to be able to really engage and open up to additional questions. And you'll be getting this recording as well as the slides, and feel free to watch the entire length of the video snippet that we pulled from. But I just wanted to close too on, because we did focus on these 3 agencies and programs. That's not saying that there's not others out there. There are a long list of programs and agencies that provide resources and services to individuals who are returning to the community. And I would highlight that please reach out to any of us to get some more insight on what those agencies are. And also, one of the things too that we wanted to, that Sherene alluded to, is the use of peers, using individuals who have the experience of being incarcerated to work with that person that you are providing services to. As a provider, we can't really say that we put ourselves in every situation that they've been in. And so being able to find someone that can walk with them, understand maybe some of these barriers and struggles, whereas we may take some of those things as, oh yeah, well, you can easily do that type of thing. But it's not the same situation for them. So please reach out if you are working with someone that you think is in need of a peer or additional services. We are always happy to talk to you about our programs as well as others that we work with.
And Juliana, if you just want to go to the next slide, I think our contact information is there. I know we only have a couple of minutes, but if anybody had any last questions, we would be happy to answer them, or you could always reach out to us with the contact information on this slide.
Great, thank you for posting your contact information. Just a few final things here. Obviously, thank you, Julianna, Lindsey, Sherene, and Tanya. This was great. Thank you, Amy, for coordinating this session. Amy has pasted a few links into the chat. The first is the evaluation for our training today. If you could just take a moment, it's just a few brief questions to complete that. The recording of today's presentation and the PowerPoint will also be posted on our webpage. Amy has posted that link there too, and you can also see our previous trainings and listen to those. And last is the registration link for our May training, which is Tuesday, May 23rd on self-care with Melinda from Mental Health Association. Again, if you're interested in being a presenter, please let Amy know. If you have ideas for topics you'd like to learn more about, we'd like to know that too. You can put that in your evaluation or you can email Amy. And I'm just going to flip back to see if I saw any other questions that came in. I didn't see any other questions, just a comment about this is a wonderful group. So glad they joined. May we be ever present for our clients and understand their true needs to achieve full health. Wonderful topic. The information you've shared, they'd like and be very helpful to the population we serve. So just a few comments coming in.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you.
Everybody.
Shower
Thank
with
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.